What's up, guys? Jumping in here real quick before the podcast to let you know that one of our best sales ever is happening right now. Mountain Tough is half off. So 50% off now until January 10th. We know that everyone's trying to kick off 2025 with a bang. This is the best way to do it. All you need to do is go to MTNTOUGH.com, click Start Free Trial, check out with the code half off, all one word. That's going to get you the 50% off for the year. Please enjoy the podcast.
There's a conversation that people have thinking that it is xenophobic to protect your borders, to defend the law. And it's not racist. It's not xenophobic. It's not anything other than a country has the right to defend its own nation by protecting its borders. And identifying who we allow into the country is our rights of a nation. It's an immigration situation, but it's also a homeland security situation. And both of those have to be met with decency and dignity.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefender, host and CEO, and I am so glad that you are here. I absolutely love seeing you come back to these episodes week after week. It is our goal every single episode to bring you an inspiring guest that adds some tactics, some tools, some tips to that mindset toolbox, to that mental fitness so that you can live this abundant, always ready lifestyle. Thank you, and thanks for making us one of the top mindset podcasts in the country. We love seeing that growth in this community. If you are a new listener or a loyal listener, and if you haven't had a chance yet, it does mean the world to me to see your rankings and reviews come through on the show. You can do that on anywhere you are finding your podcasts. But the rankings do two things. One, I value your feedback. I'm a big believer in iron sharpens iron. So feedback on the show or the guests is gold. Additionally, rankings and reviews through the algorithms do get these episodes out to a lot more people to transform a lot more lives. Shifting over to today's guest, a very special episode on the Mountain Tough Podcast today. We have Rocco Vargas. Now, Vince is a former member of the elite BORSTAR unit of the U.S. Border Patrol. He was a special operations combat veteran from the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. He had 3 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He's the author of the book Borderland, Defending the Home Front, and he also hosts an ironclad show himself, a phenomenal podcast called the Borderland Podcast. Amazing, amazing man. It's amazing what he is doing to get information out and actually make an impact and a difference when it comes to immigration reform and the things that are going on at the border. But more importantly, today he really talks about his life journey that led him to that and how interesting that is with him being Hispanic. Additionally, he talks about his mindset and what his mindset has let him accomplish in life. Phenomenal episode. So stand by for my conversation with Rocco Vargas. You were at 275, right?
Yeah.
Nice. That's Washington State.
It is.
And were all your combat deployments as a Ranger?
Yeah. I did 3 tours, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq during my time at Ranger Battalion. And then once I left active duty and went to reserves, I was activated again as a reservist to be a drill sergeant. And so that was my only other activation outside of some little details done with psychological operations.
Okay, cool. And then did you go right from that into the border security role?
No, I left active duty and got directly into the prison system. I was a prison guard for a private prison. It was kind of the fastest transitioning job I could find at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I got hired within like 30 days, started the little academy that they had. Private prison doesn't really have an academy per se. They just kind of have a check the box and PowerPoint to death for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And then you're a prison guard. And that was like, I think they paid $23 an hour at the time, which is pretty good money getting out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And the fastest thing I could get into that paid good, that kind of still felt like I was, moving forward in life.
Yeah. How was that experience?
That was it was interesting. There were some good days and some terrible days. Like working in a prison, you're serving time with them in some kind of capacity. Mentally, I learned a lot about officer presence. I learned a lot about kind of how you carried yourself and how important that was for the inmates to see someone with a little bit of confidence, someone who had a little bit of self-respect, and it went a long ways with how they treated you in the prison. You learned a lot about communication. You learned a lot about how to de-escalate. And you just kind of really learn how to be very confident in those rooms with 40, 50 different inmates who are in there for many different reasons. And all you have is a radio. It teaches you a lot of things about yourself and kind of how to kind of control a room like that, where you're the opposition essentially. And I think it improved my abilities as a law enforcement officer later in life.
Yeah, that's had to be intimidating, man. Just in a room like that.
Yeah, it's funny walking in a room and there's guys in there for murder and whatnot, and you're just like, oh man, I got nothing but a radio. It's just me.
That's intense. Did you see some positive life transformations happening in prison? You hear a lot of the negative, but did you see some guys turn it around?
Unfortunately, during my time, I really didn't get to see much of a success story that I would hope for. I did see a lot of recidivism, right? Which within 6 months of someone leaving, coming right back. And so that was pretty hard to see. But, there was guys that were pretty positive, and hopefully they did get out and hopefully they did do something with their lives that were a little bit more productive than what they were doing. I've had a lot of friends kind of go through the prison system and some of them make it out and do something with their lives that they're productive and really successful. And, some unfortunately don't. And so it's kind of a hit and miss, and whether they get into a program after that helps them. One of the programs I've worked with throughout the years is called Homeboys Industry. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't.
Yeah, dude, it's a really cool program that former gang members can get out of prison or get out of the gangs and enter into that program, and which kind of helps them establish a foundation of assimilating back into civilian culture, removing tattoos that are gang affiliated, and getting them resumes and job opportunities. And so programs like that, I think, are super valuable for those who spent time in prison and incarcerated, giving them an opportunity outside of, once they get out.
Did you see that it is a tremendous amount of gang life inside of the prison?
Yeah, it's the only way of life, it seems like, in prison. You have to, they had to side with some kind of, clique, and they had to pick a side, and it's who they were protected by, but it's also who they were exploited by at times, and so it was a really fascinating thing to watch. And in the private prison in Arizona, in different private prisons or different state contracts in which you would see different kind of a situation. In a California contract, it's very segregated. The blacks are with the blacks, the Hispanics are with the Hispanics. And even within the Hispanic community, they're separated by different gangs, Sureños, Norteños, things like that. And so it's very segregated in a California prison. And so the California contract kind of respected the same style. Even being in Arizona, the California contract followed the same rules of California prisons by way of segregation. But if you had, say, an Arizona contract and, they were in there for federal cases, you would see a blend of, a blacks working out with the whites, which is not common in a California prison. And so it was interesting to see kind of how that dynamic changed per contract.
Yeah, that's wild. Could you?
Yeah, it's different.
Is it doable to go through like a prison sentence without attaching to some sort of gang?
There is people that do their best to, but then at that point you fight alone and you're not protected. So if some group wants to exploit you for your food, for your body, whatever the case, you have no one to defend you. And so I would almost imagine if you're doing a long-term sentence, you have to house up with somebody.
That's wild.
It is. The whole prison world is different. I had enough of it for 2 years that I was ready to get out of there as soon as possible. And I was very fortunate to get into the Border Patrol at that time.
So you went from Ranger Bat to the prison and then into border security?
Yes.
Where'd you start at with border security?
I started in Del Rio sector.
Okay.
I started in 2009, Del Rio sector. Everyone starts the same, a regular agent, a line agent. You're learning the job, the day in and day out kind of work. I was out of Eagle Pass North, there's 2 stations in Eagle Pass, one's south, one's north. South has a checkpoint. North does not have a checkpoint. And so I've never really worked the checkpoint operations that you see maybe on YouTube or whatnot. I just worked strictly field work, which means, what we call cutting sign, which would be tracking, which a lot of hunters would be really good at. And guys who are former hunters that go into the Border Patrol were really good at this skill set, is just really tracking footprints or tracking, impressions on the soil or in the grass, and being able to kind of identify how many that is and then push it out until you finally, apprehend the individuals.
Man. And did your parents legally immigrate from Mexico into the United States?
Well, my mother's family was the Mexicans. My father's Puerto Rican.
Okay.
So my mother's side of the family, my grandmother, she did enter the country illegally by way of stealing the identity of her sister who was born in America. So kind of a crazy story.
Yeah.
Back then the border wasn't so defined as it is now. Back then, a lot of people would migrate from Mexico into America just to do work and then go back. And so this border territory was a little bit more of a blurry line. And, some of my grandmother's family was born in America just by way of migration and work. And then those who were not born in America were obviously not citizens. And so when one of her sisters died at a very young age from illness, she thought it was best to go and take the identity of her sister and continue forward as an American citizen. And so that's the history of my mom's family.
That's wild. Hey guys, I want to let you know about Jace Medical. I know a lot of Mountain Tough customers, a lot of Mountain Tough community members, those listening to this podcast are going on big hunts, massive expeditions all over the world. We love seeing that, and we love that you already know that you have to train physically for these trips. You have to train with your weapon. You need to be proficient with your weapon, but an often overlooked area of these expeditions is your personal medication. We actually just got back from a trip like this. The Mountain Tough crew went to Kyrgyzstan, and we needed the peace of mind of a customized medical kit that we could take with us, and we needed it at the exact time for this trip. So we went with Jace. We got our Jace case sent directly to us. We were able to grab it, open it up, throw it in our Kyrgyzstan pack, and take it with us. It gave us the peace of mind that in these international environments, we were going to be covered when it came to infection, GI issues, and anything else we were going to run into overseas medically. So check these guys out, an amazing company. The Jace case is going to come with 5 antibiotics that cover the 50 most common illnesses that you're going to run into anywhere in the world. But additionally, there's 29 add-ons that you can choose to customize your kit. So you can throw things in here like ivermectin, EpiPens, anything you need to customize it personally for you. So check these guys out, an amazing brand, amazing company, very practical for the Mountain Tough community. All you need to do is go to jacemedical.com and use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH at checkout. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. With that in your DNA and that part of your history, were you feeling some sort of calling to serve and work in the border? Obviously, you had a calling around serving your country with your military career, but were you feeling called to the border?
Not so much. I'd really never even thought of it. Growing up in LA, you're in the melting pot of every culture, race. We weren't really defined by, Mexicans and Americans and blacks and whites, and so much as it is today. I think we just kind of existed in our time, just trying to figure it out. I knew I was Mexican. I knew I was Puerto Rican. I knew the differences of the food. I knew the cultures of my families, but it wasn't pushed on us very much as kids. I think, it's when every, Latino family, they decide how they want to assimilate to American culture. My parents both worked hard. You know what I mean? They spoke Spanish to each other. They didn't speak Spanish to us. So I'm one of those who doesn't speak very good Spanish, as well as, trying to figure out that identity growing up. It was more so, was I good at sports or not? And was I going to join a gang or not? Those are the big decisions as a kid in LA. I played sports with every race you can think of. And, that's kind of how I saw the world. I didn't see it through a lens of race. I saw it through a lens of sports and competitive spirit. As I got older, I started to understand, more in the military, you hear a little bit about, we make fun of each other because of our races. It's kind of how the camaraderie of our organization got closer by making fun of each other.
Yeah.
Being called derogatory terms wasn't as offensive as it is today. It was just kind of how we communicated in a way, because in war, no one cared what color skin you had. You know what I mean? It was like, is my brother going to defend me or not?
Yeah.
It wasn't until my first deployment in a squad room where we're cleaning our rifles after a mission, where a squad leader was talking about, hey, what do you guys plan on doing when you get out? And my father's a 32-year LA City firefighter. I thought maybe being a smoke jumper would blend Army Ranger and fire together would be a kind of a cool future. And so
sweet.
I was kind of leaning on that, something in the fire space maybe. Everyone was your typical firefighter, police officer, whatnot, 3-letter agency hopefuls. And my squad leader said, Border Patrol. And he's a big Mexican dude, and I was like, damn, Sergeant, that's kind of crazy. You're Mexican. Why would you want to be a Border Patrol agent?
Yeah.
Very, very naive thinking at the time. Didn't really understand what Border Patrol's capabilities were, even what their job was, just, controlling the borders and whatever that meant. Wasn't raised to really understand that concept. Even though I spent every year, we went to Mexico every year, and it just wasn't a thought that's, I didn't think about the illegal immigration situation. I didn't think about my own family who made choices of becoming a citizen by, stealing an identity.
It's super ironic, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when he mentioned that, I was like, what is it about the Border Patrol that was interesting to you? He goes, man, we can be serving our country on our own soil, doing what we do now in country. Like in Iraq and Afghanistan, our mission as Army Rangers was to kill or capture high value targets that were associated to terrorist acts on Americans. And so we were able to gather intel and identify that there was people in their cell phones that were American citizens or living in America at the time that were connected to terrorist organizations. So knowing that what we're doing overseas was to hopefully disrupt any kind of terrorist act on American people, it felt that it only made sense for me to use the skill sets I learned overseas to do those in our own country, on our own soil. And especially, we knew there was a threat of terrorists coming into America by way of the southern border.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, man, that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't I think of a future where I can use the same skill sets I have here, doing the same things I'm doing here, but now on the American border, in country, on our own soil, where I could go home and sleep in my own bed at night. And it made more sense to me. By joining the Border Patrol and getting into the special operations teams, I was doing what Army Rangers did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but now on our own soil. It just made sense. And I was like, damn, I never thought of it. But then I had the question of like, but you're still Mexican. Like, that doesn't feel weird or wrong. And, that became kind of a challenging conversation. It's like, yeah, we're Mexican, but we're also American. right? We're Mexican Americans, you
Yeah.
know, and I would argue more like we are Americans more than we are anything, since we, you know, we're born in this country, we're defending this nation, and our cultural background is, you know, of Mexican descent, and mine is also Puerto Rican descent. And my uncles, my grandfather, my father all served this country to kind of uphold this freedom that we ran to, and that our generational, you know, families came to and believed in, so much so that it's now our job to defend this same idea, so that there's a future for our children to still live and be raised in a country that still uphold those same values.
Man, it's
And
crazy.
then it wasn't so blurry of a decision anymore, right? It was a decision to like uphold this nation, defend it by way of protecting our borders, because I knew at the time that there was terrorist threats coming through the southern border. And as well as, you know, this very complex topic of immigration and understanding what is right and wrong, it came down to, well, what's legal and what's illegal. And I was able to differentiate it by that idea.
Yeah, and if it's legal, you don't want a lawless nature. And
Correct.
I even noticed that statistically with the election this week, the reporting after the election was 54% of Latino men voted for Trump. And so there is some sort of belief that regardless of race or ethnicity or where any of us were from, this belief that we still have to serve the country and protect the law is really interesting.
Well, it's a distinct difference between what's legal and illegal. And there's a conversation that people have thinking that it is xenophobic to protect your borders, to defend the law. And it's not racist. It's not xenophobic. It's not anything other than a country has the right to defend its own nation by protecting its borders. And identifying who we allow into the country is our rights of a nation. And even though Hispanics might, you know, it might be confusing to some, right? It might not feel good, but there is a law in order, and we do on the same time of us allowing and understanding who comes into this country, the secondary effect of that is having good security foundation for the nation. And so it is a two-part answer that both need to be matched, right? They both need to be comfortably met. And when I say that, it's like it's an immigration situation, but it's also a homeland security situation. And both of those have to be met with decency and dignity. We have to be able to create a nation that has strict immigration policies, that you have to come here legally. And by way of legally means, you know, you do the proper paperwork, we identify who comes in, and then we make a choice whether we believe these individuals are allowed to be in this country by way of their background, their education, and what their intentions are in this country.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that is like the illegal immigration, you know, has been exploited because of cartel organizations, as well as the loopholes in our own personal systems, right? Our systems through asylum and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so since that's been exploited so heavily, it almost makes the legal process look like, why am I doing it legally when I could do it that way and get here and get the benefits of doing it illegally? So whether it be neglect, whether it be just I don't know what you want to call it, our system currently has created this loophole that has been exploited to the point where it's become unsafe in this country. And I don't think anyone wants a future where we have a open border and we have no idea of who's coming across.
Yeah.
And so I think when you saw the polls and the voting, it was just the American people speaking, you know, out of frustration, saying, hey, whatever's happening, we don't like it.
Yeah.
And I don't care what color your skin is, your culture, anything. If you're living in this great nation, we all have an expectation of safety and some kind of filter at the border that works, right? Some kind of system. And I think that was what was spoken when we saw how, you know, the public voted.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Yeah, it's like the analogy of, do you lock your doors at night at your home?
I mentioned that in my book. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I wrote that whole piece of my book that I got the concept from a former chief of the Border Patrol, Ronnie Scott, I believe his name is. Brilliant how he speaks on the subject. But we all make a determination of how much security we have in our own house, right? And we all we make a risk assessment of how we allow people to come in or come out. And we should have that same ability to do that as a country.
Yeah. It's going to keep the country.
And we do have that ability. The weird thing is we're not using that ability.
Yeah. It is interesting just how the loopholes through some of the law recently, has created that drastic situation. And that drastic situation is so much different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I know that now, and I'm sure you're an expert voice on this, but the individuals being arrested at the border, I know that like Chris Clem told us that he had arrested people from 177 different countries, and there's only 197 documented countries. So people from all over the world are accessing that loophole.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because transnational organizations and smuggling organizations have found a way of making money and capitalizing on the situation. They've said, hey, look what's happening in America, and we can get you in. And that's kind of how the word of mouth spreads. And now all of a sudden, this is a huge money market for these organizations who exploit this situation.
When you first made the decision to work for Border Patrol, did you get any grief from your family or community being Mexican?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a misconception of what the career is. There's a thought, right? And it's only gotten worse throughout the years of the media and their misrepresentation of the career field. But when I was doing this in 2009, you'd have family members like, why would you do that? Your own people. And it's a very confusing statement when they say that, like, it's your own people. It's like, it is, but it isn't, right? It is, but it isn't. It might be my culture, but my job as an American citizen and the job I chose as a Border Patrol agent is to protect the nation. So that means anyone entering into this country outside of a port of entry, I have to stop and apprehend and question and then make a determination on their case. And then from there, process them and let the immigration system handle it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to explain when most people don't understand the capacity of the Border Patrol and the day in, day out job and what it looks like, because it's just been underrepresented publicly, right? There hasn't been a lot to talk about. There hasn't publicly been a space where we get to, it's not, you know, you've seen cops. We were raised on cops. We know exactly what that job looks like.
Yeah.
We see the intricate side of it when you see this video platform. You don't have that of the Border Patrol. You know, you haven't had anything of that of the Border Patrol until now. And so now people are starting to learn more about the career. And the only way they learn is either by the media giving a negative ideology of it or a negative response to something they have no idea of, or the Border Patrol itself showing you through their social media platforms.
And how long were you in the job? How long were you at Border Patrol?
I was just under 7 years.
Okay.
Just under 7 years. And I resigned only because just personal issues that were going on in my life and wanting to pivot my life into a different direction.
And then you're serving now through your show and continuing to fight this fight by bringing solid education out to the American public on the border.
Yeah. So, you know, I went into film and television. I became an actor for a TV show called Mayans M.C. I did that for 5 seasons. And during, I think it was season 3, I started to see a lot of negative representation of the Border Patrol through the media. I started seeing a lot of discrepancies and people kind of demonizing the career and whatnot. And it became challenging to be in this space where people don't understand it, but yet they still make these claims that the Border Patrol is a terrible career field. These people are all racist and whatnot. And so I kind of made it a mission of mine to help educate others by writing a book. And so I wrote the book Borderline, and Borderline was essentially my memoir as an agent. I didn't really talk too much about the military, didn't talk too much about what happened after, just the time of my service for the United States Border Patrol. I talked about the rescues we made, the lives we saved, you know, the rescues we made, the dope that we caught, and the special operations units within the Border Patrol that are not spoken about publicly very often.
Yeah.
My goal was to make that one of the best recruiting tools for the Border Patrol, to highlight the career field, to show them that they have a voice on the outside that still believes in the career. And that kind of catapulted me into, boom, the journalism space of the border.
Yeah.
I was one of the most outspoken and probably more balanced ideologies of the career. There's some people that speak very heavily right or heavily left. I'm kind of in the middle of saying, I'm Hispanic. I did the job. I was also in the military. So I see it from this perspective, and giving kind of a very educational version of the career. And so the hope was that the average person could pick up the book and read it and start to really understand our immigration as a country, how our immigration kind of even is established. People don't even understand the difference between Homeland Security, immigration. They don't understand that you can't enter this country illegally. Even we can't leave this country illegally. We can't leave this country outside of a port of entry and think that's okay. No, that's still breaking the law.
Yeah.
And so explaining all these little nuances of the border to people, I felt was probably the best first step in helping educate the community. That put me into the space where I was getting called for interviews. I was getting called for podcasts like Tell Me More, Tell Me More. And as that was happening, things were getting even crazier for the Border Patrol, right? Then the Trump administration changed, went to the Biden administration, and then this thing got really crazy where people started like, I need to know more. I need to understand it. And so we started the Borderland podcast. The Borderland podcast is produced by IRONCLAD, which is a great partner of mine. And they helped me create this platform where we can invite some of the biggest and well-known experts in the border crisis space. And that means I don't care what your politically affiliation was, but I care about what your expertise is, and educate us on your expertise. Here's your platform. Let me ask questions. And we've been able to interview some of the most important people in the immigration conversation. From investigative journalists that have been embedded with cartel to even immigration judges who see firsthand what the asylum situation looks like and their opinions on it. That I don't always agree with some of our guests, and that's okay. To me, it's a fair journalism practice of just allowing them to state their opinions based on their expertise. And we just let them, we created a platform of information. And I think it's been very successful. We're one of the biggest border patrol, one of the biggest border crisis podcasts in the world. And it's been a great thing to be a part of.
Hey guys, I did want to interrupt for a quick minute right here and let you know about some supplements I've been taking. I did shy away from supplements for a long time. I was always cautious about what they were made out of, where they were from, and who the team was behind the brands. But over the last couple years, I've got to meet the team at Mountain Ops from top to bottom, and they are an amazing group of humans. I've got to know the CEO, Trevor Farnes, really well, and he is a mission-focused individual that cares about humans living a better quality of life so that they can have that abundant life. So over the last couple of years, he has helped me add some things that have changed the game for me. One of those things that I've added is creatine from Mountain Ops. It helps me maintain some muscle mass, but also it's a big player in cognitive function, one of the most researched supplements out there. Also, I've added reds, greens, and protein, all from Mountain Ops. What I found as a busy professional, always on the run, I do eat a whole foods diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but on the go, it's hard to get enough vegetables, fruits, and protein. So I've added that from Mountain Ops, and it has significantly changed the game. I can feel it in my performance. I haven't got sick for a long time, and I can certainly feel it in my mental clarity as well. The last thing I've added is the Mountain Tough Hydrate product for the backcountry, for hunting season. When I'm in the hills, I do run short on those electrolytes. We even have a Mountain Tough flavor, the Mountain Tough Lemon Lime Hydrate, and that is a game changer for hydration in the backcountry. So I keep it really simple. That is all I've added to my protocol, and it has certainly helped me, and I certainly believe in the team and the culture behind Mountain Ops. They have started an initiative that's been around for a while called Conquer Hunger. Conquer Hunger is giving meals to hungry kids that aren't getting enough food, and they've given out over 6 million meals plus to kids through their Conquer Hunger initiative. So every order that happens at Mountain Ops, a percentage of that order goes to Conquer Hunger. So certainly an incredible company, an incredible culture. As a listener to the show, you do get an exclusive offer to Mountain Ops, so make sure you check that out. The offer is incredible as a first-time purchase at mountainops.com. So build your order if it's your first time. They are offering you a 20% exclusive discount. All you need to do is enter the promo code Mountain Tough, all one word, all caps, for 20% off your first order at mountainops.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. That journey that your life has taken you on, whether you like it or not, through those steps has made you, one of the expert voices on the border. And because of that, I was definitely curious around what you think the next couple months could look like, because there is going to be some volatility between, November, December, before Trump takes office in January. And then very curious around your thoughts on what could actually happen in the next couple of years. I know the border most likely will be more secured, but in terms of the amount of violent criminals and gang members and cartel members that are in the country already, what are our odds of actually getting some of that stuff under control?
Yeah. So let's start with these next few months. I believe we're going to have a heavy influx of illegal immigration. Their goal is to get into the country before Trump takes office. that's what I believe is going to be happening. It's going to be a huge funnel of just run for the border, and not like knock down the wall and run. I just think we're going to have a lot of people saying now's the time before January, get into the country. The traffic does slow down around the Christmas time because people are celebrating their own Christmas and New Year's. But I think within the next month, we are going to see a big influx. I'm going to be heading down to one of the borders and trying to observe for the next couple months and see what happens is word of mouth. The cartel starts to tell them like, hey, Trump's now in office. That means that money goes up. It's going to be more expensive. So you better do it now. Here's our new pricing. And that starts to happen. So by way of just the situation, Trump being elected president makes the cost of coming to America that much more expensive.
Wow.
Because they know how hard it's going to be when he takes office. So right now, this is where they're going to make their money. This is their 2-for-1 deals, right? This is the time they're going to try and really exploit these individuals, saying, hey, if you want to come in now, you got to come in now, but here's our new price.
Crazy.
And because the price is going to double, triple by the time January, 6 comes around. And so that's genuinely what's going to start happening with these transnational organizations, with all these countries that have been trying to exploit this. They're still going to try and exploit this while they can. And so this cost goes up. Cartels and transnational organizations are going to be making way more money now as they start to bring a bigger influx of immigration coming through our borders, trying to exploit the asylum situation that we have going on currently.
Man.
And that's just crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we've seen this happen in the transition of Title 42 back to Title 8. We saw the same thing happening, this big influx showing up like, let me get in now while I can.
Yeah. That urgency.
Yeah. Yeah. And what in the future, Trump has been very vocal about what he wants to do. What he talks about is mass deportations. He talks about going back to building a relationship with Mexico, maybe bringing back the remain in Mexico situation they had prior, which meant that any illegal immigration that's trying to come into America by seeking asylum, they have to remain in Mexico while their case is being worked. And so that could be 2 years, 3 years, or whatever the case. That really helped us a lot because they didn't have this big influx and we didn't have to create this kind of loophole for the asylum because they're already in holding in Mexico. They're staying there, no issues. And so that was a really decent situation for the immigration situation we have. But I imagine he's going to try and build a relationship with the new Mexican president, Sheinbaum, and see how that goes. We don't know what that's going to look like. I do think it's going to be more of a positive for us. What they say is they're going to try and make the cartel be identified as a terrorist organization. If that happens, I'm curious to see what actions will be taken after. Does that mean we're going to start using military force to try and dismantle and disrupt? I don't know what that looks like. I couldn't even tell you if that's a good or a bad. I'm just like, damn, here we go.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a space where we want to create any kind of conflict with Mexico. Everything we do is probably going to be really like a team working together and trying to really help dismantle these cartels so that Mexico can thrive like it should.
Yeah.
And it has been in the past, but without the heavy pressure of the cartel. And so I'm really excited to see what that looks like. There's a misconception that Trump's going to be deporting legal immigrants or not any kind of Hispanic, but those are just far-fetched, fear-mongering comments. The immigration system is the immigration system. If someone is here illegally, there's still a lot of loopholes on how they can try and remain here in America by way of asylum cases, by way of many other things. And so I think there's just a lot of fear in that. There's processes that people need to use when they're here. Even if they came here illegally, you're still able to kind of fight to try and stay into the country because of job purposes, because of, relationships that have been built, because of, children that you have in this country that are doing certain things. So, it's a very complicated situation. I think the first thing we have to do is stop the bleeding, right? Stop the massive influx of immigration coming through our borders. We need to get more Border Patrol agents out in the field instead of processing, right? We have a lot of agents that are doing a lot of the processing instead of in the field where they can be doing more of a service to this country by deterring, right, or apprehending. And then from there, once we stop that bleeding, then we really have to understand, what are we going to do with this massive influx that we've had for the past 3 years, 4 years, right? What do we do? What do we do now? The job gets handed to the ICE. ICE is supposed to be the ones who are in the cities that are being able to identify those who are into this country illegally, who are, working illegally and whatnot. And so, that's a job for them to do their part. It's not comfortable, right? It's not an easy conversation for those migrants who come to this country, who are working their asses off and doing their best to do the work that most of us would never want to do. It's not a good conversation, to say they might get deported. Truthfully, I hope there's some kind of system that allows them to stay here and remain and work if they're really putting in that effort and working. If they have established good job, if they're working in those areas that none of us want to do, I hope that there's some kind of system in place where they can actually say, hey, I'm working my butt off. I have a good residency. My kids are in school. I'm paying my taxes. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. How do I work my way towards becoming a citizen? Well, then in that case, I hope we do open up programs for that situation, right? But any of those criminals that get caught doing nefarious things, every single one of those need to get deported. We can't sit here and keep them in this country. We have to get rid of them as fast as we possibly can, so we can get rid of these outliers, these small percentage individuals who are here to just cause harm, to do harm. We need to get them out. And so I think that's going to take us years to really start to decipher kind of who's in the country now, right? Yeah. And there's talks of a potential, some kind of forgiveness kind of idea, but it's tough. What's happened in the past 3.5 years, 4 years, it's something that we're going to be facing that for many years to come. The massive, this influx, this crazy influx of the TDA, the Tren de Agua.
Yeah.
And how they've been able to jump from these cities to cities to cities and like kind of almost invade these cities has been shocking. Shocking to watch a group that are essentially, we're not on the map and almost anyone's vision boards, right?
Yeah.
To all of a sudden being one of the biggest threats in America. That's been interesting to watch. To see that has to be a concern for every American to be like, yeah, we really need to really know who comes through these borders, because they're coming to a city near you and they're causing havoc.
Yeah.
They did it in our city right here in Dallas. A lady had her house. 4 of them went into her house. They beat her up. They robbed her. And if it can come to a city near me, who I feel is a pretty safe city in Dallas, it could come to a city near you next. And that's where some people didn't expect was going to happen, and it didn't matter if your city is, liberal or conservative. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The massive influx of individuals that have come to this country, there's a small percentage of those who are here to do nefarious acts, and they're doing it.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired 2 together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages. And I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. Yeah, the TDA is a interesting case study because they have been everywhere. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere up in Bozeman, Montana. There's rumors and sightings of them here in our, pretty peaceful state and town. And then you have Aurora, Colorado. But they already been listed as a terrorist organization?
Different states. So Texas has deemed them as a terrorist threat.
Okay.
Texas has identified them as I forget the actual title of it, but Texas has identified them as a threat. And so in that case, you'll see more actions upon them. There'll be more ways of identifying them. But that's from Texas to somewhere like Chicago, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Look at New York. Some of these individuals have caused crimes and the DA won't even prosecute. And so this is the challenge we face, is that these different rules in different states and cities,
it's tough.
It's a hard situation. I'm not here to say every illegal immigrant who's come across as a bad person by any means, right? There's a world where we need immigration. We need those workers who want to do the jobs that most of us Americans will never touch, but we have to have a system in place where we can identify who it is and know who's in this country, or else it's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous.
And potentially a numbers game at this point. If 20 million people have came across and 1% are criminals or gang members, are violent, now it's a numbers game of how are we going to find that many people that are causing
absolutely
harm.
Yeah, you don't most of these people just disappear into the system, and you'll never hear from them again until they've create a crime. They break some kind of law, and that's how it goes. Unfortunately, there's people that are been here in this country 25 years illegally, never processed any kind of paperwork, never went through the systems, probably honestly didn't know that there's a system that they can process to try and become citizens. And then they get caught with a DUI or whatever the case, and then they get deported back to a country that they've never been at for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
That happens, right? And so the immigration system definitely needs to be revamped. We need to take a deeper look at the layers of the immigration system. But like I said, I think the first things first is we need to stop the bleeding at the borders.
And one thing I really enjoy about you and what you have been vocal about recently is that it's a much bigger conversation than that, even because of the fentanyl coming across the border, because of the human trafficking, and the United States being like the number one buyer of
consumer.
Yeah, the number one consumer of child explicit material, billions of dollars of human trafficking, billions of dollars of individuals looking for sex and buying sex with minors. And part of the conversation with those facts has to be that what is going on with America? We're the number one buyer of all these narcotics and the human trafficking.
Yeah, we have to question what's going on in America, that we are the biggest consumers of child pornography, biggest consumers of child trafficking, biggest consumers of drugs, right? We are the ones who've created the market for this. And that is a concern of like, why? The drugs thing is a whole different conversation, right? Drugs, because we know that some of these big pharma companies have been pushing some of these illicit drugs down our throats and using it in a way, even though they knew it was addictive. So they created a generation of addicts based on the fact of how they were giving us prescriptions. That's a whole conversation that like, whoa, that's messed up. But now we have this kind of the residual effects of that happening currently in this country. Cultures who are ingrained in pain meds, right? Who families who just seen others go through that. And so that causes the ripple effect of trauma in their families, Then you have the consuming of child pornography and human trafficking. That becomes the biggest, scariest conversation we have here, is like what's happening in our American families, in our American cities, that we become, the biggest threat to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's scary. Right.
Yeah.
And when you talk about it, that people have lost kind of the foundation of God at times, like this faith that's driven people to kind of have a little bit more, I guess, morals and values, or to that effect. The family values, it's a lot that we have to dig into when you start hitting to that, right? Because that is the concern. Why are we the biggest consumers of this?
It's crazy. Yeah, and it is connected to this mindset and values. It's spiritual, physical, mental, nutritional, emotional. And if all those pillars aren't strong, then we start seeking out other idols or other vices. There's statistics now that like 8 out of 10 American men have some sort of porn addiction, and that porn addiction is feeding some sort of child porn industry, and that child porn industry is feeding some sort of human trafficking trade in the United States. And it is so closely connected to a lack of belief and faith in God. But we need to fight the battle from both sides. We can't only stop the bleeding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How do you raise your son, to avoid that? It's hard when the whole market is infatuated with it. These kids are raised around it, right? The social media, it's the desensitization of our children through media, television, social media. You know what I mean? When you have shows that say they're for 13-year-olds, but then they're sexually explicit, and you're like, wait, that's just for 13-year-olds. Like, I wouldn't even see something like this until I was 16, 17, And so slowly as our society has desensitized our own children to what's sexually appropriate and what's not, has become crazy.
Yeah.
The kids with text messaging and how they're communicating with each other. And it's just been, I don't know if it was an orchestrated attack or anything, but just by way of the easy access of the internet and social media, we've slowly desensitized our own selves and our kids and made it easier access to these vices.
Hey guys, there are a lot of trends out there. And one trend that I've personally found in my own life through experience that has been a game changer is cold plunging and cold water therapy. The benefits for me have been off the charts when it comes to two main categories. The physical inflammation reduction from cold plunging every day has been a complete game changer, but my favorite part of cold water therapy has been the mental aspect, the mental clarity, the stress reduction, and most importantly, the ability to build mental toughness every day in a very simple way by just forcing myself to get in that cold water has been a drastic improvement that is easy, fast, and efficient. I've tried countless different ways to access cold water therapy, from the redneck version horse troughs to building my own cold plunge system off Amazon parts and pieces. Every time I've tried that, it has been a disaster until we found Ice Barrel. Ice Barrel is the most advanced barrel design on the market, and they have the most advanced high-tech chiller on the market as well. I've met the CEO, I've worked out with the CEO, we've had them at the lab. They're a great team, American-made manufacturing, and we're proud to announce that you can now access a discount on Ice Barrel products. All you need to do as a podcast listener is use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH. That's going to get you 15% off all Ice Barrels except the chiller. Again, that's Mountain Tough, all caps, all one word, on icebarrel.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Yeah, it makes you have to be vigilant 24/7 from a lot of different viewpoints, because you can make sure your kids aren't on phones, but their friends are going to have phones. You can monitor like what you give them access to at home, but like the number one predator internet platform right now is a kid's video
Roblox.
Roblox. And that's like publicly available at a lot of public schools. So like you're vigilant at home, but you're not sure what's going to happen at school. And there's story after story of those predators building relationships with kids on that game at a really good public school they might be going to.
Yeah, I mean, like my kids go to private school for a specific reason, and when I decide that private school is not suitable enough, then they'll go to homeschool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being very present in their lives is what I try to do.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be present to a point where, one, everyone around them knows that their father and mother are heavily present into their lives, but two, for them to know that, I'm always watching. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their phones are on lockdown. Their friends their friends are on lockdown in the sense of who they become friends with and who they go see and meet and where they stay. All those things are like on heavy lockdown in our house because you have to be in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very cautious with your kids, with your kids' coaches, with your kids' teachers. Like everything is a potential threat. How sad it is, but I don't see. That's how I see the world nowadays because I see how prevalent it is across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a whole different generation. It's a whole different kind of ball game, but it's up to us to be that dad. I mean, no one else is going to do it for us.
Absolutely. I mean, the fathers in the household, I think, is one of the biggest things that we have to really focus on as men.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny? I didn't. It's even in households where divorce happens. Okay, fine. That father can still be present. That father can still find a way to be in that kid's life. You know what I mean? And I think some men take a back seat because it becomes an uncomfortable situation. I think that's even more so when the father needs to be like, you know what? I'm still the dad. Let me make a presence in this kid's life. Let me be available to him. Let me be at their games, at their schools. Let me somehow co-parent in a way where I'm readily available and not just like that weekend father, not just that holiday father, but like heavily present in their lives.
For sure. Yeah, it's our job. It's our mission as, protector, provider, regardless.
Yeah.
I was curious your perspective on a little bit more trafficking details. My wife and I have gotten pretty involved with trying to get in that fight as much as we can stateside on some rescue work. We've done quite a bit of work with Covenant Rescue Group. It's out of Alabama. It was started by Jared Hudson when he came out of the SEAL teams, and we've been able to go along with him on several different sting operations. And on those sting operations, every single time they happen, we do catch a lot of bad guys, and it makes you feel like you could catch a bad guy every single day, every single town, every time that you ran this operation, this style, because like a 2-day operation, you might hook and catch 13, 14 guys. Vehicle operations, you might catch 4 or 5 a night. These are individuals that are coming to meet a child for sex. And that is interesting when you combine the statistics that are talked about a lot. Now, I don't know the exact numbers, but you'll hear the number of on the southern border that 300, 400, 500,000 children have been documented coming across, but we don't know where they're at now. What are your thoughts on that? Where are those kids at?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So what happens is if you're an unaccompanied minor, is what they call it, an unaccompanied minor, then they go through the system. That's what's the name of it? Either way, so what happens is when they leave a Border Patrol custody or the ICE custody, they get handed off to another government organization that is meant to house them in the appropriate facilities, whether it be like foster care, essentially. Well, that system is where you say they got lost. Well, they weren't lost in a system and like they were just pushed off and disappeared, but they were given to different housing situations that were considered to be, homes, but those homes were not deeply followed or tracked. And so the oversight of the program became almost non-existent. And so as they started finding homes for these kids, they were losing track of them. Man. And there's a possibility that a lot of those homes were set up just for trafficking them, and there was very little to no oversight on how that process works. And so it's almost a very deep situation of human trafficking assisted by government funding.
Yeah.
By way of like lack of oversight.
Yeah. That's wild.
And a lot of NGOs were a part of that. A lot of these NGOs, I did a whole podcast on this, on these NGOs that were making billions and millions by the government to supplement that area that the government didn't have in housing these unaccompanied minors. But the oversight of these housing situations, right? These homes that were meant for these kids, there was no oversight. And so essentially there was proven that some of these homes have been associated with, SA and many other things. And so, yeah, that was the lack of oversight from the government that us taxpayers paid, that they gave to the NGOs who had lack of control of the situation. And so 300,000 missing minors, no clue where they're at. And exactly, they could be lost in the system somewhere, some housing, who knows?
That's a lot of kids, man. It's a high number.
Insane. It's insane.
And some of them could be doing fine. We just can't get a hold of them, but some of them certainly can be in some sort of sex trade operation.
Correct. Absolutely.
Man. Well, in closing, just curious your thoughts on, we've talked a lot about your life and your journey in the southern border, but us in Montana, we're real close to the northern border. And I know that like Washington State was reporting like a 500% increase of illegal immigration across that northern border. Has there been a shift and a pivot with more attention down south, pushing more dangerous things up north?
I wouldn't say a shift and a pivot. I just think that the northern border is just as important to pay attention to than the southern border. And that there is organizations that are using it on both directions, going into Canada or using Canada to come into America. And so it's a little bit more challenging to work, or actually to kind of to see the traffic that's happening. We might be missing a lot of it in areas that are not fully focused. And so, yeah, the traffic is there's through traffic as well that comes through Mexico through America into Canada. There's all kinds of it. It's a very different border, and there's tons of action on those northern borders. I'll be visiting those borders next year a lot because I want to be documenting what's happening.
Yep.
You have drugs, you have illegal immigration, you have trafficking. It all happens there just as much as it does on the southern border.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some small towns up there too with, not much resources. Like and then Montana, the backcountry, connects the north to the south right through Canada, just all those wilderness areas. It's wild.
Absolutely.
Well, man, thanks for jumping on the show. I appreciate you and proud of you for the work that you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, bringing a ton of information and education out to a lot of people that need it. And it's helping us make informed decisions, and love your mindset too, that, part of this is America's problem, and we gotta clean up our own act and rebuild our families and our household is part of the equation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yep, you too.
What a phenomenal conversation with Vince. I hope you guys enjoyed that one as much as I did. If you want more info and deeper knowledge with Vince, make sure you're checking out his podcast as well with IRONCLAD, BORDERLAND. It is a phenomenal production and show, and he's throwing out some killer information on that show of his that all Americans should need and want to know about. Remember, we're looking for those golden nuggets. The big golden nugget I have on this episode, Vince didn't get into it much because we did run out of time, but he himself personally has gone through some big mental health battles. He's gone through some alcoholism battles and how that has affected his career. What that led him into a passionate role as an advocate for men's mental health. So I want you to check out his Light the Fuse men's retreat. It's a specific annual event that he participates in and promotes, and it's a mental health retreat designed for veterans, first responders, and those seeking personal growth and healing. I know there's a lot of guys out there that are struggling. We're all struggling through different issues. I know there's a lot of veterans and first responders listening to this show right now. So check that out. Vince's Light the Fuse Men's Retreat. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Stay dangerous, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.